The Search for Cleopatra. Where, oh where is Cleopatra? Her name is everywhere. The last pharaoh of Egypt is on a board game. A perfume is named after her. Her name is on a popular brand of cigarettes in the Middle East. She is orbiting the sun as the asteroid 216, Cleopatra. The literature critic Harold Bloom memorably referred to her as the world's first celebrity. Yet, if she is everywhere, Cleopatra is also nowhere. There is no reliable depiction of her face. What images that do exist are based on unflattering silhouettes on coins. There is an unrevealing 6-meter-tall image on a temple. Museums display a few marble statues, most of which may not even be of Cleopatra. People have wondered about the location of Cleopatra's tomb since the Romans entered the city of Alexandria in 30 BC. She barricaded herself behind the doors of her mausoleum, surrounded by gold, silver, pearls, and other treasures. It may have been in the mausoleum where she killed herself at the age of 39, so she could escape the humiliation of defeat and captivity. Yet for all we know about Cleopatra's life, no one really knows how she died, or even where her grave might be. Considering it was known by some to be the most beautiful city in ancient Egypt, Alexandria has attracted less attention than the older sites along the Nile, such as the pyramids at Giza or the monuments at Luxor. A succession of earthquakes, tsunamis, rising seas, and the recycling of building stones have destroyed the ancient quarter where Cleopatra and her ancestors lived for 3 centuries. Most of the glory that was ancient Alexandria now lies submerged under 6 meters of water. In the past few decades, archaeologists have finally begun searching for Cleopatra's burial place. Recent discoveries such as massive stone statues, paving blocks, and columns provide us with a better understanding of Cleopatra's world. So far, however, the underwater work has failed to yield a tomb. More recently, a desert temple outside Alexandria has become the focus of another search which began in 2004. Kathleen Martinez, a professor from the Dominican Republic, contacted Zahi Hawass, then Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities. She shared her theory that Cleopatra might be buried in a temple near the coastal desert town of Taposiris Magna, 45 kilometers west of Alexandria. In her opinion, modern-day researchers have missed many pivotal clues about where Cleopatra is buried. Martinez then traveled to Egypt and arranged to meet Hawass. She outlined her theory and asserted that Taposiris Magna was where Cleopatra was buried. After studying more than a dozen temples, Martinez then headed to Taposiris Magna to explore the temple ruins. She felt Cleopatra might have selected the site for her burial because it was inside the limits of ancient Alexandria, but not yet under the control of the Romans during those last days before her death. At first, Martinez was focused less on the obvious prize of Cleopatra's tomb than on simply finding sufficient evidence to prove her theory that Taposiris Magna might be the place to look. She hoped to demonstrate that the temple was among the most sacred of its day and that tunnels had been dug underneath the walls. Within the first year, she was rewarded by the discovery of several underground tunnels. In 6 years, Taposiris Magna has become one of Egypt's most active archaeology sites. More than 1,000 objects have been recovered. One important discovery was a large cemetery outside the temple walls. Yet the tomb of Cleopatra has not been found. The theory of who is buried at Taposiris Magna still rests more on educated speculation than on facts. Opponents of Martinez's theory point out that it is rare in archaeology for someone to announce they are going to find something and then actually find it. There is no evidence that Cleopatra tried to hide her grave or would have wanted to, says Dwayne Roller, a respected Cleopatra scholar. All the evidence is that she was buried with her ancestors. The material associated with her at Taposiris Magna is not meaningful because material associated with her can be found in many places in Egypt. If Cleopatra's tomb is ever found, the archaeological sensation could be rivaled only by Howard Carter's unearthing of the tomb of King Tut in 1922. But will finding her tomb and her body deepen our portrait of her? On the one hand, how could it not? In the last 100 years, the only new addition to the archaeological record is what scholars believe is a fragment of Cleopatra's handwriting. On the other hand, finding her tomb might diminish some of the mystery that surrounds her. Right now, part of the appeal of Cleopatra is that she is free to be whatever we want her to be. Could finding her final resting place actually make us less enthralled with Egypt's last pharaoh?
Where Inca Kings Lie. Rising to the heights of power, a series of Andean rulers subdued kingdoms, sculpted mountains, and forged a mighty civilization. On a Peruvian island in the middle of Lake Titicaca, hundreds of people stand in silence as a priest recites a prayer. Descended in part from Inca colonists sent here more than 500 years ago, they keep many of the old ways. They weave colored cloth, speak the traditional language of the Inca, and work their fields as they have for centuries. Today, they are celebrating the festival of Santiago, or St. James. Walking behind the priest, several people carry a statue of the saint, just as the Inca once held the mummies of their kings. For many years, there were few clues to give us insight into the lives of Inca kings. The Inca had no system of writing, so we have no written records of life back then. Any portraits that Inca artists may have made were lost. The royal palaces of Cusco, the Inca capital, fell swiftly to the Spanish, and a new colonial city buried or obliterated the Inca past. Yet, archaeologists are now making up for lost time. Near Cusco, they are discovering thousands of previously unknown sites. These new and exciting discoveries are shedding new light on the Inca. In the 1980s, most archaeologists believe that a young leader named Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui, also known as Pachacutec, became the first Inca king in the early 1400s. But Brian Bauer, an archaeologist from the University of Illinois at Chicago, believed the Inca dynasty had far deeper roots. With the aid of a colleague and several assistants, they discovered thousands of previously unknown Inca sites in the Cusco Valley. The new evidence revealed for the first time how an Inca state had risen much earlier than previously believed, sometime between 1200 and 1300. The ancient rulers of the region had fallen by 1100, in part because of a severe drought. Local leaders battled over scarce water and led their people into neighboring villages in search of food. The frightened villagers fled to cold, windy hideouts nearly 4,000 meters up in the mountains. But in the fertile valley around Cusco, Inca villagers stood their ground. Instead of fighting among themselves, these villages united into a small state capable of defending themselves. Between 1150 and 1300, the Inca around Cusco capitalized on a warming trend. As temperatures climbed, farmers moved up the mountains, creating crop fields by cutting green terraces into the cliffs, and subsequently enjoying large and successful corn harvests. Inca kings began eyeing the resources of others. Local leaders in the valleys fell one by one until there was only one mighty state and one capital, the sacred city of Cusco. The kings next set their sights on the lands around Lake Titicaca. Sometime after 1400, the same Pachacutec set his sights on the south. He successfully attacked the area in the mid-1400s. In the years that followed, Pachacutec and his sons subdued all the southern rulers. Under Inca rule, Andean civilization flourished. Inca engineers transformed roads into interconnected highways. Inca farmers grew some 70 different native crops, often storing 3 to 7 years' worth of food in vast storehouses. And Inca builders created architectural wonders like Machu Picchu, which continue to awe visitors today. By the time the Inca king Huayna Capac took power around 1493, little seemed beyond the reach of the Inca. For his new capital in Ecuador, 4,500 people carried immense stone blocks all the way from Cusco, a distance of nearly 1,600 kilometers. In the Inca heartland, a small army of people built an estate and palace for Huayna Capac and his family. To date, archaeologists have located the ruins of roughly a dozen similar estates built by at least 6 Inca kings. But things changed in 1531. Foreign invaders had landed in the north amid a civil war. Covered in metal and carrying lethal new weapons, the Spanish easily overcame the Incas and took prisoner the Inca king, Atahualpa. 8 months later, they executed their royal captive. In 1534, a young prince, Manco Inca Yupanqui, was picked by Spanish leader Francisco Pizarro and allowed to rule as a puppet king. Manco Inca was then only 15 years old and was easily controlled. He thought the Spanish were gods. However, in the months that followed, the Spanish seized the palaces of Cusco. Manco Inca tried desperately to drive them out, but his army suffered defeat. Over the next few decades, the Incas' network of roads, temples, and estates began falling into disrepair. In 2001, Brian Bauer and 2 Peruvian colleagues went looking for the mummies of these Inca kings, hoping to restore to Peruvians an important part of their cultural heritage. Bauer identified several possibilities for the burial site of Pachacutec and Huayna Capac. Using special equipment, they scanned the likeliest areas and found what appeared to be an underground tomb. Bauer and his Peruvian teammates were thrilled. But when the archaeologists finally dug down and opened the door of the dusty chamber, they found it empty. Today, no one can say where Peru's greatest kings lie. Concludes Bauer sadly, the fate of the royal Inca mummies remains unknown.